Hi there, hello, welcome to another weekly werewolf report in this year of the werewolf. Hi, I'm back. Life happened, had to take a little bit of a break, but I'm back. And I'm back to talk about some stuff. So first of all, the book. Reading another trilogy. The first time we did this with the Howling trilogy, it didn't go so well. But now we're reading the Wolf Hunt trilogy by Jeff Strand. We are on book 2 that I just finished. And I gave this book 5 stars. I loved it. I'm loving this series of books. They're so fast moving. The characters are so amazing. The monster work is so great. So I do want to talk a little bit about it. Careful to avoid spoilers because something big and surprising did happen in this book. Absolutely don't want to ruin it. But I do want to talk a little bit about some... They're not inconsistencies. I don't want to call them inconsistencies. We've still got another book. This stuff can be fixed up, tied up nice and tidy in the third book. So in the first book, our werewolf, we had one werewolf and his name was Ivan. And Ivan's story was that he was kind of a psycho killer. And he was going to be a psycho killer whether or not he was a werewolf. And he was changed by a bite. And it sort of set his murderous side free. That was the story. Ivan kind of had a dim view of other werewolves because other werewolves worked to repress their murderous side. You know, there's always the animal side that they can't completely lock up, but they didn't necessarily want to go on murder sprees the way Ivan did. And we get to the second book, and we have a few more werewolves in this one. And they're kind of psycho killers, which kind of surprised me when it became clear that even in human form, one named Shane in particular, he's kind of a psycho killer. He's not a good guy as a human, and as a werewolf, he relishes murdering people. It's fun. It's a game. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, I thought Ivan said, you know, other werewolves were kind of stuck up snobs who look down on him. And then we meet another one in the second book who's like that. That little thing does get resolved at the very, very, very end of the book. But in this book, they make a thing that you don't get changed by being bitten. You have to be born a werewolf. You have to have werewolf parentage to be a werewolf. So either the werewolves are very bad at being a community and spreading information and having education of who they are be a part of their identity, which is possible. That would actually be completely in line with Jeff Strand. Or, I don't know, or we have some anomalies in the storytelling. Again, I'm not judging. I'm looking forward to seeing if this is all resolved in the third book. It's just, because it would be funny if the werewolves are really bad at being a community and just they don't talk to each other. But I was kind of surprised to see after such a big deal was made in the first book that Ivan is a psycho. He would have been a psycho murderer whether or not he was a werewolf. And then immediately meeting more psycho werewolves in the second one. But the book was a ton of fun, very fast paced. I do want to point out, if you read these books, because it was in the first one and the second one I've noticed, take a moment to really read and relish the chapter titles, because I found myself cackling a few times over them, because they're very funny. Same with the second one, like the first one, there are funny parts, but there are kind of surprisingly brutal parts, which is very Jeff Strand. If you've never read him, and knowing that he's, you know, the funny guy, you might not know that he doesn't pull punches. He doesn't flinch. There are parts that are like, ooh, okay, you went there, which is nice to see in horror. It's not always nice to see when you know that an author has flinched away from taking that next step, which is the author's prerogative, I get, but it is nice to see someone who will go there, and go there in a way that is still entertaining. Not necessarily provocative, just entertaining. I love these books. These three, if the third one is anything like the first two, I'm going to be a happy little summer. These are going to be some of my favorite books that I've read this year. That's it. I am just having a blast reading these. I have to recommend them. They're on my Kindle right now. I have to get them in physical form. They have to be a part of my physical collection. I love them so much. I cannot recommend them enough. If you haven't read them, do it. If you have, did you like them as much as I do? Let me know. All right, now we got to talk about movies. So I watched 2016's Uncaged, and that picture that I just popped up, if you want to watch this, it is on Tubi, but there is more than one Uncaged on Tubi, so just look for that image I popped up. That's the one that is on Tubi. I didn't like this movie, but it was the story. The story was the problem. I had some issues with technical aspects of the storytelling, and I also... so... one of the characters is like the best friend of the person who finds out they're a werewolf. And this is another case of it's a genetic thing. You are born a werewolf and it comes on to you at a certain age, apparently. And he's the best friend of the werewolf character. And he's supposed to be someone that we like. He's supposed to be someone who is a good guy until his... frankly, hysterical tendencies eventually make him a bad guy. I don't think I'm ruining too much there. It's just, I hated this character. I never liked him. He is, quite honestly, stupid. And I could use what little brains I have to try to find a better word for that. I've got a thesaurus behind me that I could look at, but he's stupid. Every reaction he has is stupid. He makes scenes in places where it's completely inappropriate, and he is hysterical. His reactions to things are non-thinking and hysterical, and I hated this guy. And it actually took me out of a lot of the story, how much I hated this dude. There was also a whole kind of side story or a prong to this story that I found completely unnecessary. It didn't belong. But you know, the reason why I do want to talk about this movie is because they had practical effects. We had Wolfman makeup, and it wasn't just guys with teeth in their mouth going arr, like we've had in a few of the movies we've watched this year. Why am I saying we? I'm doing this by myself. I guess it's to try to feel like I'm not so alone here. It's okay. A few of the movies that I've watched this year have just been guys with teeth in their mouth going, arr, and they're supposed to be werewolves. They did makeup, and they did good makeup. I did giggle. The Wolfman has like a big long Amish beard. And it is funny, but I did enjoy the makeup. We had, it is a minimal transformation scene because this is a lower budget movie, but it's a good creature, and I have to applaud that kind of stuff because, look, I feel like lately the horror genre, us people who like scary movies, who like more than just mainstream scary, I feel like we're thankful for crumbs sometimes. And quite often those crumbs are covered in pet hair and dirt, and there's a few ants stuck to them, and we're still going, oh, thank you, it's so good. And I think it's even more so for those of us who love werewolves, because there's just not a lot of care put into this. Now, I don't think that's the case with this movie. I think the reason why I didn't like this movie is completely subjective. I think a lot of care was put into this movie. It's not the greatest storytelling, but it's not lazy either. And the creature effects are good. It's a good monster movie. The human aspects of it are the ones that kind of got on my nerves. And that's all me. That's on me. So if you're a werewolf fan, I think this movie's worth a look. If you don't like it either, that's on you, just like this is on me. But maybe you will. It's worth your time. It's not one of those 2-hour-long movies. It's your standard movie length. And I just think it's worth a peek because we have so few. And this one is not purposeful shit like some of them are, where it's like, oh, we made shit, now make fun of us and give us attention. And there are movies who do that. We cover them on the Ghostwriters podcast all the time, where they did it on purpose. You can tell they did it on purpose. This was not serious. This one was a serious attempt. It was a good attempt. The things that I didn't like about it are completely subjective. So Uncaged 2016, give it a look. It probably won't make it to my end of year recommendation list just because I didn't enjoy it, but I think if you're into werewolf movies, give it a watch. If you watched it, did you like it? Am I a monster? So I mentioned earlier in a community post on my YouTube page that I wanted to talk about the movie Wolf from 1994, starring Jack Nicholson, James Spader, and Michelle Pfeiffer. Because this is a movie, I don't think I added it to my original werewolf movies that I recommend, because this is a movie that I've always had conflicting feelings on. I don't hate it, but I also don't know that I like it as a werewolf movie either. And someone commented and said it feels kind of like a paranormal romance. And I think that commenter hit the nail on the head, because it does. And it would fly that way much more obviously if the roles were reversed. If it were a woman going through these kind of changes. But in 1994, we were still very much, werewolves are masculine creatures. The change into animal is very much a masculine, testosterone-driven change. But there are things about this movie that I still find fascinating. I don't love it as a werewolf film. And I'm having trouble kind of verbalizing why that is. So I do want to talk about the things that I like about it, the things that I find fascinating. And first and foremost, the things that are great about this movie are James Spader. That man is delicious as a villain every time. Now, he plays in movies where he's not a villain, and he's good in those, and he's memorable. And the fact that, you know, when he was younger, he had that magnificent head of hair, and he's good looking, and he's always very even-keeled, is something that I think works for him. But he is at his best as a bad guy. Like Frank Langella. Frank Langella is one of those actors who was always, he was always patronizing. He always talked down to people, no matter what role he was in. Like, did you ever see Frank Langella's turn as Dracula? That Dracula is not so much menacing as much as he's condescending. And it's a fascinating look at that monster. But I think James Spader is that way too. James Spader is just wonderful as an antagonist because of the way he talks. The way he has this tendency to look down on people. And he's fascinating because he's smart. And his turn as the bad guy in this, where he starts out as human, and he's a bad guy as a human, but he's manipulative. He's playing some sort of climbing game, and he's two-faced. He does things behind people's backs. He's a bad guy in that sense. But once he's bitten and he's turning more and more into a monster, he's more and more menacing, and he notches it up just a little bit. Every scene he's in, it gets notched up just a little bit more until the final showdown. And I think he's so good in this. If this had just been a movie of James Spader starting off as kind of this weaselly business guy turning into full werewolf monster and killing people, I think I would have liked this movie more as a werewolf movie. But then there's the whole Jack Nicholson part. Now, I know a lot of people in my generation who hate Jack Nicholson. They don't like his acting, they don't like his characters, and I don't get that, because I love Jack Nicholson. I am sad he doesn't act anymore. I'm sad he's gone. He's one of those guys that you watch him in movies, especially movies where he does a lot with actresses, where he is maybe not always necessarily the romantic partner, even though he's wonderful in those, but where he has to bounce off of women a lot. And you can tell the actresses do well with him. He's someone who lifts up actresses. And even when he's not, even movies where he's like the Joker, you know, his turn as the Joker was great. And I just love Jack Nicholson, and I like him in this movie. He's not doing a bad job. I think it's his storyline that kind of bothers me. So he's this older man. He's a little older than middle-aged, right? Or he's just late middle-aged. And he's just kind of in a slump. He's an editor for a publishing house. And he is kind of slowing down in life. His marriage is, you know, as he sees it, it's fine, but it turns out it's not. And the reasons why it's not fine have something to do with him getting older and slowing down as a man. And this is a kind of an undercurrent. His testosterone is drooping a little bit. He's kind of hunching towards old age in a kind of sad march, leaving his youth behind. And he receives the bite and starts to transform. And it begins with sort of, he's invigorated. He's suddenly better at his job. He's a better husband. He has a sex drive back. And then he meets Michelle Pfeiffer. And Michelle Pfeiffer is, she's not a sweet younger woman character. She's kind of a chip on her shoulder kind of female character. And their whole thing, it is like paranormal romance where he would never have caught her eye before the bite. And the way it ends up working out for, you know, I'm not a big fan of romances anyway. I'm not a big fan of it was fated that we find each other. And it's not necessarily how it plays out in this, but the covering each other's asses aspect, I think it's the romance part that turns me off, but it's also I think there's an uncertainty in this too. Once they finally do the full turn, are they a wolf forever? Because it kind of looks that way. And I don't like that. That's something I never liked about Ginger Snaps too. As much as I love Ginger Snaps, and Ginger Snaps will always be in my top 5. I don't know how that movie could ever be pushed out of the top 5. I never loved that the transformation, once it's complete, is permanent. The shapeshifter aspect of it is important to me when telling werewolf stories, because you have to be back in your human form to feel the horror of you losing control, to feel the horror of what you did when you lost control. That's always an important aspect for me. And you don't get that in these stories where the change is permanent. They just kind of surrender. And there is a beauty to that. It's just not my favorite. And I think that's something that always bothered me about this movie too, because I think Jack Nicholson turns into the wolf and is gone, and he's going to go wait for Michelle Pfeiffer to complete her turn, and they'll run around in the woods together. I don't know. I don't like that ending. I don't know. Maybe someone out there can word it better than I can, but this is a movie that I don't hate, but I don't like it as a werewolf movie. I think if we had gotten rid of the Jack Nicholson, Michelle Pfeiffer human aspect of it, of love and of the fears of growing older and things like that, if it had just been James Spader becoming more and more of an asshole, a violent asshole, it would have been more my speed. I don't know. Do you like the movie? What'd you think of it? It's old at this point, and I remember when it first came out, I was like, fuck yeah! I was 11 years old, but still like, fuck yeah, werewolf movie! And watching it and being like, and trying over the years to watch it again and see if I can redeem it, and just still being like, not disliking it, but still not loving it. I don't know. I still don't quite know what to make of it. And I don't know. Life is good with variety, and being kind of put off by a movie that I didn't hate, that I will rewatch when I have the opportunity. If it's on, I'll sit down and watch it, but still just kind of being like, I could have fixed this somehow. I don't know. I like that things like that exist. I don't want to love and hate everything. I like being in the middle. What can you do, right? So that'll be it this week. I want to thank you for your patience, for always being here, for commenting, for recommending. Let me tell you something. My TBR pile this year has been a lot of fun, with the ups, with the downs, because of you all, for taking the time to comment, for taking the time to share your own reading experiences and watching experiences. And hopefully by the end of this year, I will have a list of werewolf books and werewolf movies to recommend so that us lycanthrope files, is that the right word? I don't know, lycanthrope fans, so that we have a little more to indulge in from year to year. Things that we can watch and hopefully rewatch that aren't such sad, awful disappointments, that aren't the same, I don't know, 5 or 6 movies over and over again. We'll have more to dig into. And yeah, so that'll be it. Thank you as always. I will be back next week, no worries. Bye!